a lot of people ask, well, what do we mean by precision medicine? And from our perspective at the foundation, we think of precision medicine as going from an environment where we treat patients basically as cohorts defined by a phenotypic disease diagnosis. We take patients, we get a set of signs or symptoms, we treat them with a drug, and we have variations in response. One of the challenges we have here is that in general, when we're looking at improving drugs in this kind of a model, if 30 or 35% of our patients respond well to that drug, we think of that as a good response. In the context of precision medicine, what we want to do is get to a position where we take that cohort of patients, and then we can subdivide that cohort of patients based upon their mechanism of disease, based upon their genotype-phenotype relationships, into separate cohorts in that disease process that we can treat with different kinds of treatment regimens and get a much higher response rate. And within that, we can do a number of key things. We can take existing drugs and treat them here. We can take and repurpose various drugs that are already approved. We can invent new drugs for each of these cohorts. So this is the area that we want to move to. And what the TranSMART Foundation is working to do is to work on all ends of this to facilitate a movement to precision medicine. And what is our focus? The key thing that we talked about, but a key thing that we want to focus on is not just the translational data that we've talked about, data that's in the preclinical or observational clinical trials, but real-world data. And in fact, real-world data dramatically dwarfs the kinds of data that we have in organized and structured clinical trials. And today, these data are very hard to access and very hard to utilize. So what precision medicine defines for us is a need to go in and not just work with our translational data, but to work with real-world data coming out of the clinic. So how do we think of this from the perspective of where we are? Well, we're focused here in translational research. We have basic drug discovery, good translational research, and our goal has been to improve outcomes by using this information in the drug discovery process. But also, the thing that we can do in working together is to access healthcare information, where we're getting data from doctors and patients in private practice from clinical research and use that to improve outcomes. What is TranSMART? I think, how many people here know what TranSMART is? Oh, so not everybody, okay. So for those of you who aren't familiar with TranSMART, TranSMART is an open source knowledge management system for translational research. It has advanced analytics that work in with the data so that one can readily analyze and work with those data and integrate them into your research. And I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about it over the course of the next 2 days. What does it have in it? It has interactive analytics and statistics. You can bring together clinical variables and phenotypes with molecular and high-dimensional data to really reproduce the kinds of analyses that one sees in primary translational research. What we've been focusing on is bringing in another platform, the I2B2 platform. I2B2 stands for Integrating Informatics from the bedside, from the bench to the bedside. The key thing here is that I2B2 is the dominant open source platform used in clinical research. It's used in over 200 different academic medical centers and hospitals to collect and utilize patient information coming from live clinical data to facilitate clinical research. If you look at an example of I2B2 data, this is data coming out of a small hospital in Paris. What's important here is that in a small hospital, they have 600,000 unique patients. They have over 80 million, almost 100 million data points that are collected from these sets of patients. And there's an awful lot of information one can go forward and look at. I mean, there's over 14 million vital signs collected on these 600,000 patients. There's over 46 million data points coming from clinical surveys on these patients. And in fact, what we know today is that with the growth of genome data and human genome sequencing is today, many of these patients are getting their genome sequenced, they're getting their tumor genome sequenced, they're getting their microbiome sequenced. The level of high-dimensional data coming from these patients is increasing dramatically. I2B2 basically is a platform used to build cohorts. We can go through all of our phenotypic data, select patients with different kinds of phenotypes. I took a few slides out. But the idea here is that we can go through in live clinical data that's fed into the platform using FHIR and other kinds of technologies from EMR and readily identify patient cohorts for further work. So what is our goal? Our goal is to bring the healthcare domain together with the translational research domain, bring the platforms closer together so that we can share data between these platforms, and ultimately to connect these communities, make them into a single community with a single integration between these two platforms so that we can create a number of new opportunities. The opportunities that we see here are to really deeply integrate data coming from the real world evidence with the structured clinical data, with the basic research data in the context of genomes, to really understand the relationship between phenotype and genotype, and then to use that information to create new medicines, as well as to treat patients in a much more effective way in our learning healthcare system. So just to give you a quick example, some of the work from one of our members here, Paula Viak at Harvard Medical School. He's integrated I2B2 and TranSMART into a single platform that he uses in his research. In fact, he's gotten in the last 5 years over $20 million worth of grant funding to build new patient data sets using this integrated I2B2 and TranSMART. And the idea here is that he's focused on rare diseases, and so he can take and basically build a Google Maps for these diseases. The idea is that we have all sorts of different data in many different layers that we can integrate using the patient as the GPS coordinate. So as Google Maps takes and uses the GPS coordinate to integrate your restaurants and your museums and your hotels and all these different layers of information, we use the patient ID to link all the data around patient consents, all the longitudinal data, expression arrays, clinical cohorts, imaging analysis, etc. So these are the types of data that one can collect in that. This is an autism rare disease collection that Paul has built. He has about 3,000 patients, and you can see that he's got 12,000 vital signs, he's got 700 arrays, and these are all live clinical patients in the clinic. This is not a research cohort, this is following a patient cohort. And what kind of analysis can you do in this context? Is you can take these clinical cohorts, identify various mutations, link those with the clinical data, and you can start pursuing these genotype-phenotype relationships in your live clinical population. But as we move along, one of the things that Paul's group is doing is working on doing exome sequencing and working their way to full genome sequencing. So in this autism cohort, they have a workflow now that does exome sequencing, does variant calling, does variant annotation, using the phenotypic data, and puts that all into the data warehouse. One of the things that we can do with a platform like this is build it very readily, and you have to take, when you're not working in research and you're working in a clinical production environment, you have to work in a secure environment. And so HIPAA compliance, GMP, GLP, these are all very important elements for an I2B2 TranSMART space. And what we've done is build a cloud-based environment that has secure end-to-end encryption. So all the data in the data warehouse itself is encrypted so that one can have a very secure, scalable, cloud-based environment for working with patient data. The TranSMART Foundation has recently merged with the I2B2 Foundation to form a combined entity that's focused on maximizing the synergies between I2B2 and TranSMART and bringing together the clinical research and the translational research communities. And what we've done is form what we're now calling very uniquely the I2B2 TranSMART Foundation. So, and one thing that's really important, I think anybody who's talked to me over the past 6 months has heard this. One of the hardest things you might ever think of doing is merging two nonprofits. And so the I2B2 TranSMART Foundation is an open source software foundation that focuses on a couple of key things. We focus on managing code governance, and we use a modified Apache Software Foundation model to do this, maintaining the TranSMART code base, maintaining the I2B2 code base. And now with the development of an I2B2 TranSMART project management committee, we'll also be developing a unified I2B2 TranSMART code base, and then other code bases that fit the foundation mission. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a second. We're also focused on developing a unified precision medicine learning healthcare community across academia, industry, pharma, biotech, hospitals, etc. We collect and distribute open data, so not the private data that we heard alluded to, but the open data, so that we can have as much analysis-ready data available in the platform as possible to stimulate research. We attract new resources to contribute to the platform in terms of in-kind contributions, grants, sponsorship, philanthropy, etc. We bring the community together for events, meetings, and conferences. So from the foundation perspective, we're composed of sort of the mission, which is uniting the healthcare domain with the translational research domain to create an environment for precision medicine. A community focused on open source, but also open data and open science collaboration. And a platform, which is an ecosystem of technologies and capabilities that are all open source that provide an environment for doing this research, an enabling technology base. Our vision is realizing the promise of precision medicine. That is that first slide we talked about, which is being able to go into patient populations, subdivide those populations based on specific clinical biomarkers, and more effectively treat the subcohorts of patients. Our mission is to enable the effective collaboration for precision medicine, and to do that through sharing, integration, standardization, and analysis of the heterogeneous data from healthcare and research through the engagement and mobilization of a life sciences-focused open source, open data community. Why do we want to do this? We feel that in the environment we have today, the effort that goes into building these integrated platforms is so much larger than any individual group can do on their own. But it creates a number of synergies and benefits, which I think you can see here. What does the ecosystem look like? What are the pieces that we can link together in this open source environment? Well, we can start with the I2V2 data model, which is where 250 million patients have their data today. Link that with TranSMART and the high-dimensional data, the structured analytics and statistics, where we can work with those patient data in a very sophisticated way. We also have federation technologies in TRINE and SMART, where we can do patient level data lookups. We have federated advanced cohort selections. And with Arvados, which is a large-scale compute infrastructure and federation technology, we can in fact build networks of TranSMART and I2V2 instances where we can formulate queries, send them out into that network. The system can spool up the resources it needs to do its work and then bring back the results without ever having to move the data. So if you have data export issues and whatnot, Arvados, in fact, is the perfect solution for this. You can build a cluster in each environment where you have the data. You no longer need to move the data. You don't need to relinquish ownership of the data, but you can still share and collaborate with those data. If we drill down into the underlying technologies and approaches, we have TranSMART, I2V2, the key databases, some of the capabilities around that. You'll hear more about our interfaces, and interfaces to EHR systems, OMOP and CDISC and various things of that nature. Arvados, various genetic data, but the idea is to build an ecosystem of open source platforms that work together in a coherent way to enable research across this precision medicine spectrum. This is the AMIA poster on I2V2 on OMOP, and in fact that's part of the release that will be coming out at the end of this summer from I2V2. Can we take advantage of these things to integrate these kinds of technologies and capabilities into TranSMART? The answer is absolutely yes. And so I think these kinds of things, OMOP integration into I2V2, you'll hear a little bit more about 17.1 of TranSMART, which integrates with Arvados. And we can bring a number of these different tools into this environment so they can interact and integrate more effectively. So I think the benefits of bringing all these technologies together are that, number one, it builds critical mass. By adding clinical scientists and translational scientists together, we can bring together a group that is more self-sustaining. We can provide a unified strategy for the integration of these tools, enable a single seamless environment going from patient care all the way back to the research bench and forward again. We also unite two strong brands, I2V2 in the clinical space with TranSMART in the translational research space, as well as a long history and capability of that infrastructure. So let me tell you about the foundation itself. We have a modified governance model, and our governance model is one where we have a board of directors which is drawn from our membership, in which everything comes together into that governance. We have a leadership team that facilitates the operations of the foundation. We have a business advisory board that advises the board of directors. We have a partners program that the business advisory board is drawn from. And at the center of everything, we have our project management committees. So a project management committee is a group that governs a particular platform within this environment. And it's modeled on the Apache Software Foundation's model, which has been very successful. So a little bit more about the governance model. Our board of directors is 11 members with 3 committees. The committees are the Executive, Governance, and Finance Committee. We've drawn these 11 members from the I2B2 Foundation, from the TranSMART Foundation, and from the community. We also have a new members group, and what we've done is follow the Apache model of a meritocracy by building a membership group, and we seated this with people that we're inviting to the membership group. But that group nominates and elects new members, and nominates and elects the board. So we have a set of individual stakeholders that come together to provide the governance for the overall efforts of the foundation. As I said, the membership model follows the Apache Software Foundation. We work very closely with ASF and with Linux Foundation in trying to take best practices from other open source communities and make those work here. Just to give you a quick sense here, the board, as initially voted in here, is drawn from the I2B2 Foundation and the TranSMART Foundation, with a number of independent people that have brought in to try and have increased European representation, gender diversity, and more. The leadership team of the I2B2 TranSMART Foundation, Project Management Committee is at the core of the governance of the platforms. That is, we're not a top-down organization, we're a bottom-up one here, where the technical leadership is driving the development of the platforms. And that's really what the Project Management Committee enables. As I said, the primary role is governance and oversight of the product and platform, and a secondary role is to have a role in the longer-term development of the community and make sure that everything that they're doing in that effort continues to develop and integrate this community as we grow. What projects are we focused on? The projects today, TranSMART, which has been the longest running project management committee in the foundation. We've been running that since 2015 with 3 major releases, 4 minor releases, and currently have TranSMART 17.1 in our release process. We're forming a PMC around I2B2, which is the first time they've had an open governance model for I2B2. We're bringing that together as well. OpenBell, which is a PMC which we're working to build some critical mass around. We keep having sort of stops and starts there. And then Paula Viak will be leading a PMC on the I2B2 TranSMART platform. And this is what he has open sourced specifically for work in his group to try and make it into a more broad product that everyone can adopt. We're also discussing additional efforts with the Common Workflow Language and Arvados, and we'll be bringing other projects in as we can expand the platform capability here in enabling precision medicine. But one of the key things for us is to work with partners to sponsor activities in the foundation and give people an opportunity to participate. And in that partnership program, what we have are a lot of ways for people to participate in guiding the board and management. There's a business advisory board that advises the management team, advises the board. There are key foundation events, you get annual meeting passes, etc., to attend those meetings for free. Participation in marketing, and then participation in various foundation projects. There are 3 levels to our partnership program. There's Platinum, which is a higher level of financial sponsorship, Gold and Silver, as well as academic affiliates. So, as a quick summary of what I've gone through, what I wanted to let you know is that the TranSMART Foundation, as it's working, is expanding its mission with this role in precision medicine, linking clinical research with translational research. We think it's the right direction to go. We think it builds critical mass. It creates a bigger and larger collaborative community. We're building a new integrated open source foundation around that, bringing in additional projects, sort of think of the Apache Software Foundation for healthcare. And we know that precision medicine in the cloud is real, and we're focused very much on bringing technologies that we have together in a secure cloud-based environment with that context of having individual data sitting where it lives and having analysis go out to the data, gather its information, and come back with analyses. So the future is in expanding the open source toolkit and expanding the community to grow this effort overall. Just quick acknowledgements. I'd just like to thank the I2B2 group coming out of DBMI, the I2B2 TranSMART Foundation, and certainly everyone at Etrix that has contributed greatly to TranSMART over the years. So with that, I don't know if we have time for questions.
Well, thanks, Keith. I think good overview of what's happening.
Yep.
Good example for how fluid the landscape is.
Very fluid.
And please, any questions you have for Keith?
Anyone?
Maybe while you think, I do have a couple.
Oh, please.
So one is, if you look at what the combined target goal is for the TranSMART Foundation,
Mm-hmm.
how does that relate, you would say, to things like the 100,000 Genomes Project, Genomics England, and other things that are coming out that actually play in the same space?
Oh, it links very closely to this. I think that one of the things that we see doing is trying to expand our purview from, a few tens of thousands of patients in structured clinical trials to the overall global patient populations that are involved in any kind of healthcare. The thing that really sparked my interest in this was when I was sitting down with Sean Murphy over dinner, and he said that Partners Healthcare, he's CIO of R&D at Partners, as well as the architect of ITB2. We were talking about the schema of TranSMART, and in the schema of TranSMART, the central table is what's called the observation fact table. So every patient observation ends up in that table. And he said, at Partners, he says, we currently have 80 billion observations in our central observation fact table, just at Partners alone. And I said, who uses those data? Who can make use of those data for research? And the answer was, well, people at Partners. And that to me is just not enough. I mean, the key thing we need to do is bring all these data together and enable people to work together on hundreds of millions, if not billions of patients worth of data. So there's a lot of interaction and integration with various other projects. As I see things coming forward with not just the 100,000 genomes or the million genomes, and we're working closely right now with Arvados, which came out of George Church's lab and the Personal Genome Project. But I see that there's going to be an environment, probably in 10 years or less, where we're going to have a significant amount of genome data on the average patient in the healthcare system. And we see efforts like Foundation Medicine and others. There's a company, I don't know if people here know Veritas. There are a few others that are starting to do whole genome sequencing in a retail healthcare environment. And I think that's the real opportunity. We have to get out ahead of that.
Okay. Any questions?
Let me just add one more thing, if I can. So it's like, one of the things you have to do is anybody here play hockey or know hockey? One of the things I've been thinking about a lot is Wayne Gretzky, right? And when a reporter was asking Wayne Gretzky, why are you such a great hockey player? He says, most people skate to the puck when they play hockey. He says, I skate to where the puck is gonna be. And he thinks about where the puck is gonna be and he skates there. And what we're trying to do at the foundation is not skate to the puck, but skate to where the puck is going to be. And one of the things that we're doing now is looking at technologies like blockchain. Anybody here familiar with blockchain? So it's the technology that underlies Bitcoin. But we think that blockchain is going to play a very big role in healthcare, particularly in environments where we're dealing with individual patient information. And we can envision an environment where blockchain enables an analyst to go out into a federated network, access patient data across that network, and in fact, compensate the patient for the use of their data directly. So you can enable and facilitate that interaction. And we can do this in a complete sort of, many-to-many network connection. So we think that the ideas here around blockchain, around federation, around keeping data where it's generated are going to be the key drivers of what we're doing in the future in precision medicine. So.
Oh, okay. There's one in the back.
Thank you very much. My name is Albert Agusti. I live in this beautiful city. I'm very happy, very lucky. Thanks for invitation and being here. Taking this analogy, hockey analogy, okay? I'm a soccer fan, not a hockey fan, sorry. So I will talk about the ball.
Yeah.
But the concept is the same. No, I'm going to run to where the ball is going to be.
Yes.
By doing that, you probably influence where the ball is going to be.
Yep.
Because some other player will see that you're running. So to what extent are you really going nowhere or influencing the future?
Well, I agree with you. I think that simply by anticipating where the future is, you're going to self-create it. And we think we're doing that as well. So we take very seriously working with the various research communities, looking to where things are going, but not doing that in sort of a sole environment. We don't think we're the driver. We certainly think we're a participant. And that's our goal, is to enable and facilitate. The thing that I think is unique about our area of endeavor is that the cost of building platforms that can do the things that we want to do and deal with billions of patients, that kind of infrastructure is just too difficult to build in a sort of a venture-funded kind of role where we typically do industrial research. And what I think we need to do is come together as communities and integrate grant funding and sponsorship and individual investment to build platforms that work together and integrate into these wholes that are greater than the individual sets of pieces. So I think we're influencing that. I hope we're influencing that. But I think it's a greater space for all of us to work in. And I can envision this sort of fluid environment where an individual scientist can have a hypothesis, connect into this network, find the data out there to work on that, identify some new opportunities, and then be able to pursue those in that space, and do it in a way where you have access to all the data, and you can in fact compensate people for the use of their data and their participation in that research. And I think that's the environment that I see that I think we want to build. So if that's where the ball's going, that's where we want to be.
Hello. My name is Alex Sanchez. I am also from Barcelona. And I have a concern. Perhaps I am talking too early and this will be discussed later. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the scenario you are showing is great and very promising. But there is an aspect which is my main concern, is how do you convince people to share their data? I mean, I work for one of the big hospitals in Barcelona. In Catalonia, there is a project which deals with sharing all public data for public research. But up to now, nobody has been able to explain how it is going to happen, because it is often hard to obtain the data from the people from your side.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's great, but I have no idea how to make it possible.
No, and this has been a very critical problem that there have been a lot of approaches to try and solve, and still we haven't solved them. Some people even share data by obfuscating the data so that the data is shared, but it's not actually useful. What we see is, I think there are two things that have to happen. One is we have to encourage an initial set of people to do sharing and make that the standard operating procedure. So if you're not sharing, you're not part of the community. But we also have to be able to protect the interests of the people that own the data. And one of the things that we're really excited about has been this integration between TranSMART and Arvados. What Arvados, its whole philosophy is that data can live wherever it lives and be under the ownership and control of whoever owns it. But I can still analyze it without compromising their ownership. So I can build a workflow, send it out to that center. It can do its analysis and then bring back the metadata that I'm interested in. So you're not changing the ownership of the data, you're not exporting the data. You can manage the privacy and anonymity of the individual patient data. So I think that's going to be the model that's going to work more effectively in the future, is leaving data where it is. And in fact, it's going to be too big to move anyway. But leave data where it is. Put an infrastructure around that where you've got the clinical data integrated with the high dimensional data, et cetera. And then have this environment where I can ship analytics there and bring back results. And I think by keeping that data in control of the individual owners, you'll be able to facilitate that. The second level of that in my mind is using approaches like blockchain and hyperledger, where we can, in fact, as part of that, have a transaction where we can compensate people. When that compensation could be monetary, that compensation could be through citations and other kinds of methods. But by having this transaction between those members, we can recognize people for contributing that data to the overall effort. So I think we have to move away from this, just give me your data, to one where share your data, but you can have control of it still.